Welcome to the deep dive. You know, for decades, space felt like this distant frontier, purely for exploration, maybe some sci-fi dreams.
Right, almost abstract.
Exactly. But that's changed dramatically. Today, space has firmly become the newest and maybe the most critical frontier for military strategy.
It really has. We're not talking about some far-off possibility anymore. This is happening now, it's evolving fast, and it's fundamentally shaping global power.
So to really get our heads around this shift, we're going deep today.
We are. We're looking at a really foundational document from the United States Space Force. It's called Space Warfighting, a framework for planners, and it just came out in March 2025.
Framework for planners. Sounds pretty serious.
It is, and from, a military analyst perspective, this isn't just theory on paper. It's about how to operationalize the Space Force's main goal, achieving space superiority, that concept. It now touches almost everything in modern warfare.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, let's unpack this document. We want to understand what it actually means to fight in space, from space, and to space.
Yeah, we'll look at the big picture strategy, the sort of operational nuts and bolts.
The tech involved, which must be fascinating.
Absolutely, and the geopolitics, the big chessboard view, plus how old-school military ideas are being adapted for this totally new domain.
And why should you, our listener, care about all this?
Because understanding this is, frankly, crucial if you want to be informed about where global power and security are headed. This framework, it gives insights you won't get from headlines, some really surprising stuff about this domain and how it affects us all.
All right, let's jump in.
Yeah.
The foreword says, basically, since Sputnik in '57, space has become foundational to modern life. Military space ops are the backbone of the joint force. But then it says access can't be taken for granted anymore? What's the shift? Why not?
Well, the big change is the threat landscape. It's just exploded. Peer competitors, near peers, they're developing and fielding counterspace capabilities. So the U.S. can't just assume it can operate freely up there anymore. And that's pushed the Space Force's main job into sharp focus. Achieve space superiority. The document defines that pretty clearly.
How so?
It says it's a degree of control that allows forces to operate at a time and place of their choosing without prohibitive interference from space or counterspace threats, while also denying the same to an adversary.
Okay, so control, operate freely, and stop the other guy from doing the same.
Exactly. But here's the key insight, especially for modern warfare thinking. It's not just about protecting satellites. It's about shielding forces in all domains, land, sea, air, from attacks that might come from space or be enabled by space denial. It changes the whole battlefield picture.
That sounds like a massive redefinition. The document says space superiority is a necessary precondition for joint force success. What does that really mean for a soldier on the ground or a ship at sea?
It means everything, basically. Achieving that superiority, it unlocks superiority in other domains, fuels coalition lethality, and fortifies troop survivability. It's the foundation for projecting power, for deterrence, for homeland security. Yeah. There's this great Space Force truths box in the document. 2 points really jump out. First, space is a warfighting domain, not a collection of supporting activities.
So not just GPS and comm support.
Right. It's a theater of war itself. And second, that Guardians, the Space Force personnel, are uniquely and specifically trained, educated, and experienced in warfighting activities in, from, and to the space domain. It reminds me, they actually quote the strategist Colin S. Gray in the framework. He said, "Space warfare is a certainty in the future because the use of space in war has become vital. It's simply become too important to not be contested."
The document includes this matrix figure 1 showing contested space superiority. That looks interesting. Can you walk us through those scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. Figure 1, contested space superiority for the pacing threat. It's a simple 4-box grid, but it tells a complex story. Upper left, blue space superiority. That's where the U.S. has the advantage.
Okay, good for blue.
Bottom right, red superiority. Adversary has the edge. Now, the other two are where it gets really tricky. Upper right, both sides can use space capabilities. Sounds okay, maybe? But the document calls it very high risk to the joint force.
Why high risk if both can use it?
Because it implies chaos, interference, uncertainty. Nobody has reliable control. It's a messy, dangerous situation. And then, bottom left, neither side can use space capabilities. You might think that's a draw, but the framework says it actually favors the adversary.
How does that work? if nobody can use space?
Because the U.S. Joint Force is so reliant on space capabilities, denying it to everyone hurts the U.S. more. Think about creating massive debris fields or mutual denial through electronic warfare. It's a scenario where winning could mean crippling yourself and global systems. A Pyrrhic victory at best.
So the goal isn't just winning, it's winning smart.
Exactly. Maximize your advantage, minimize theirs, but without wrecking the domain for everyone long term. That's the tightrope walk.
And space is huge. So we're not talking about controlling all of it everywhere all the time, are we?
No, definitely not. Figure 2. Dimensions of space superiority clarifies this. Superiority can be general or local, and it can be persistent or temporary.
Okay.
I mean, the domain is vast. You've got the satellites in orbit, the communication links, the ground stations, plus different orbits, low Earth orbit, geosynchronous, even out to cislunar space between Earth and the Moon.
All right.
So general superiority means the enemy really can't operate effectively across the board. Local superiority is more focused control in a specific area for a specific time or mission.
And persistent.
General and persistent is the closest thing to what you might call space supremacy. But even local and persistent, maybe protecting key assets continuously, doesn't guarantee the overall outcome.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what the naval strategist Julian Corbett said, don't chase invulnerability. Warfare is about managing risk, not eliminating it. You can't protect everything, everywhere, all the time.
Okay, so if space superiority is the end goal, how does the Space Force actually do that? The document talks about space control.
Yes, space control. That's the core function. It's all the activities you undertake to contest and control the space domain, aiming for that state of superiority. And the main tool for space control is counterspace operations.
Counterspace. Sounds aggressive.
It can be. It includes both offensive and defensive actions. And these happen across all the segments we mentioned, orbital, link, terrestrial. What's interesting is how the lines blur. Is attacking an enemy anti-satellite weapon an offensive act, or is it defending your own satellites?
Good point. Let's break that down. What about the offensive side first? What kind of actions are we talking about?
Okay. Figure 3 lays out the offensive actions. First up is orbital strike. This means actions to destroy, disrupt, or degrade the adversary's satellites in space.
How?
Could be kinetic, actually hitting them. Or non-kinetic, think electronic warfare, cyber attacks, jamming. And the effects could be permanent, non-reversible, or temporary and reversible. This can involve pursuit operations, basically chasing down another satellite, or standoff operations, hitting them from a distance.
Okay, what else?
Second is space link interdiction. This is non-kinetic. It's about messing with the enemy's critical communication links, jamming signals, cyber attacks on their data flow, disrupt, deny, degrade.
Got it. And the third?
Terrestrial strike. This isn't necessarily done by the Space Force, but it targets the adversary's space capabilities on Earth. Think bombing launch sites, hitting command centers, taking out ground antennas, attacking mission networks. This could use air power, missiles from ships or ground launchers, even cyber means against ground systems. It really shows that space war is multi-domain.
So once you've potentially gone on the offensive, or even if you're just anticipating an attack, how does the USSF protect its own crucial space assets?
Right, the defensive side. The goal is to protect our stuff and make sure we can still use space effectively. Two main categories here. First is active space defense.
Active, meaning shooting back.
Sort of. It means taking direct action against an ongoing or imminent attack. This needs really good, near real-time intelligence. It includes things like escort. Imagine sending up a dedicated bodyguard satellite to fly alongside a high-value asset ready to intercept threats.
A satellite bodyguard?
Yeah. Then there's counterattack, reacting directly against the hostile force, and also suppression of adversary counterspace targeting, basically blinding their sensors so they can't get a good target lock on you.
Okay, that's active. What's the other category?
Passive space defense. This is more about designing resilience from the start, making threats less effective without having to shoot back. Think layered defense.
Like what? Examples?
Sure. Threat warning, getting timely alerts, military deception, making it hard for them to find your satellites, maybe decoys or signal spoofing. Hardening, building satellites tough enough to withstand attacks like radiation or EMP. Dispersal, spreading your assets out so they can't take out everything at once.
Ah, like the constellations.
Exactly. Linked to that is disaggregation, putting different functions on separate, smaller satellites instead of one big, complex one. Also, mobility, being able to move your satellites or even shift ground operations. And finally, redundancy, having backups. That proliferated constellation of many small sats instead of one big one is a perfect example of redundancy, dispersal, and disaggregation. It's the whole don't put all your eggs in one basket idea applied to orbit.
So it sounds like these counterspace ops, offensive and defensive, they aren't happening in a vacuum. They're completely tied into everything else the military does.
Absolutely, precisely. The document hammers this home. Integrated counterspace operations and joint operations. Counterspace is a part of the bigger joint functions: C2, intel, fires, maneuver, protection, sustainment. The Space Force leads these functions specifically for the space domain, but it's for the entire joint force. It's deeply woven in, not bolted on.
Okay, this all clearly depends on some seriously advanced tech. What are the key technological factors here that shape how this space warfighting actually happens?
That's a huge piece of it.
Yeah.
And yes, while it's humans making decisions, the document points out space warfare involves highly automated systems. You pretty much need them to operate at the speeds and distances involved, especially with how crowded some orbits are becoming.
Right.
And we talked about the space segments, the satellites in the orbital segment, the comms links, including cyber and the electromagnetic spectrum in the link segment, and the ground stations and launch sites in the terrestrial segment. The critical thing, technologically and strategically, is that they're all interdependent. Hit any one segment, and you can potentially neutralize the whole capability.
That interdependence, that sounds like where cyber comes in again, in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really, really critical. The section on integrated cyberspace operations makes it clear. Space operations are almost entirely reliant on the network dimension. Launching, commanding satellites, getting data down, ground sensors, it all has to go through cyberspace.
So no cyber superiority, no space superiority.
Pretty much. They are inextricably linked. The document gives that stark example from 2022, the Russian cyber attack on the Viasat satellite network.
Right, you mentioned that.
Yeah, it was aimed at crippling Ukrainian command and control before the invasion. But the fallout spread, it hit regional telecom, a German energy company, French internet users. It just shows how a cyber attack on space infrastructure can cascade through multiple domains and across borders, impacting civilians too. It's a massive vulnerability for our networked world.
Beyond cyber, what about just moving around up there and seeing what's going on? How does that fit the tech picture?
Crucial elements. Movement and maneuver includes deploying satellites, repositioning them, reorienting them. A key part is rendezvous and proximity operations, or RPO. Yeah, deliberately moving a spacecraft close to another one. This could be for defense, like that bodyguard idea, or offense or intelligence gathering, even potentially servicing or refueling someday. The document specifically mentions the GSSAP satellites as having RPO capability. They're used for keeping an eye on things in geosynchronous orbit. Think orbital surveillance or inspection.
And seeing what's up there.
That falls under space domain awareness, or SDA, along with intelligence gathering and attribution. It's about having the sensors, ground-based telescopes, radars, space-based sensors, and the analytical capability to detect, track, identify, characterize, and predict what objects and activities are happening in space. You need good SDA to make informed decisions, to deter threats, and, frankly, just to avoid collisions. It's fundamental.
This clearly goes way beyond just military tactics. The whole idea of space warfighting must have huge geopolitical implications.
Oh, enormous. The USSF's approach, they call it competitive endurance. The goal is U.S. space superiority, yes, but while also safeguarding the safety, security, stability, and long-term sustainability of the space domain.
That sounds like a contradiction almost. Compete fiercely, but keep it safe.
It's a very, very difficult balance. How do you prepare for conflict in a domain vital to global communication, finance, weather forecasting, science, without risking its destruction? The framework also stresses that the USSF works within the joint and combined force, meaning allies and partners are key. Sustainment, logistics might even come from multinational partners or non-governmental groups. Space diplomacy is critical here.
The document keeps mentioning peer and near-peer competitors. How do those challenges specifically shape the geopolitics of space?
Well, these are the nations defined as capable of challenging or denying control of the space domain. Their ability to use space allows them to communicate, find targets, guide weapons, assess battle damage against U.S. forces and partners.
So it's a direct threat multiplier for them.
Exactly, which makes it a shared challenge for the U.S. and its allies. It forces a level of, if not cooperation, at least communication and understanding about norms of behavior, even amidst competition. The potential for miscalculation or accidental escalation in space is incredibly high, given the speeds and distances involved.
What about the ground stations? You mentioned they're not all on U.S. soil.
Yeah.
That must create some tricky geopolitical situations.
It absolutely does. The terrestrial sites section highlights this vulnerability. If you rely on ground equipment in another country, you're subject to their laws, their political stability, your relationship with them. You have to plan for potentially losing access, needing workarounds, negotiating agreements. It adds a layer of complexity.
And not just physical access, right?
Right. The electromagnetic spectrum, the EMS, which all those links rely on, it's described as incredibly complex. Every nation manages its spectrum differently, interprets international law differently. Operating signals across borders requires navigating this complex web of regulations and potential interference, both accidental and deliberate. It demands deep technical and diplomatic understanding.
Okay, this is really fascinating. How does this new frontier connect back to older military strategy and history? Are we seeing brand new principles or echoes of the past?
It's definitely both, and the framework makes those connections explicit. Take movement and maneuver in space, including RPO. The document calls it an enduring principle of war, just like maneuvering tanks or ships. And it states that controlling key orbital regimes gives similar advantages to controlling high ground or strategic choke points on Earth or at sea. It directly links orbital mechanics to classical strategy. And again, they bring in Colin Gray's point about the vitalness of space making conflict inevitable, a pattern seen throughout military history whenever a new domain becomes strategically crucial. The environment is new, but the human drive for strategic advantage, that's ancient.
So what does this framework suggest about planning future military operations? What are the key takeaways for the planners it's aimed at?
It lays out several key planning considerations. First, the absolute need for detailed intelligence preparation of the operational environment. You can't plan effectively if you don't understand the space environment, the threats, the adversaries' capabilities.
Makes sense.
Second, the critical role of rules of engagement, or ROE. There's a warning here about ROE being too restrictive. If Guardians hesitate to act because the rules are unclear or overly cautious in a fast-moving situation, it could increase risk significantly. So ROE needs to be clear, well understood, and balance safety with mission needs.
That sounds like a tough balance to strike.
It is. Then there's deconfliction, making sure space operations movements, electronic warfare effects, timing don't accidentally interfere with friendly forces in space, air, land, or sea, or create unnecessary debris. And finally, planning for recovery and reconstitution. What do you do after an attack to get your capabilities back online? Resilience is key.
So wrapping this all together, what does this mean for the actual Guardians, the people in the Space Force? What's the mindset shift here?
The core message of space warfighting is to really cement this mindset. Achieving space superiority is the primary mission. It defines the service. The framework ends with a really powerful statement, I think.
What does it say?
It says essentially that warfighting isn't neat. There are no perfect definitions, no textbook answers, no guarantees. The Guardian must understand the principles and, when necessary, break the rules to uncover the military genius in space power.
Wow. Understand the rules to know when to break them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about that blend of rigorous doctrine and planning combined with the adaptability and, yes, the military genius needed to succeed in this incredibly complex and evolving domain.
So we've really dug into this U.S. Space Force framework.
Yeah.
We've seen space superiority as this crucial goal, looked at the offensive and defensive counterspace playbook across all the segments, orbital, link, terrestrial. We've touched on the tech, the geopolitics.
It really paints a picture of a domain fully integrated into modern conflict, but it leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? Well, given how vital space is to everyone, not just the military, and how easily actions there could create long-lasting debris or have unintended global consequences, how does the world develop these war-fighting capabilities and doctrines while also preserving the space environment for the long term? How do you balance that military necessity against the need for stability and sustainability for all nations? That feels like the tightrope walk writ large.
That is a profound challenge, and it definitely goes way beyond just this one document or one military force. Yeah. It touches on international law, arms control, commercial space use, the ethics of it all.
Absolutely.
A really powerful thought to leave our listeners with. This discussion opens up so many more questions. We definitely encourage you to keep digging, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions about the future of space.